My guest at this time is Wrestling Inc.'s own Jesse Collings. Jesse, welcome back to the Wrestling Inc. Daily.
Hey, Nick, how's it going? I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, brother, I am doing well. Thank you very much for taking some time. We're going to dive into the world of New Japan here. Wrestle Kingdom 15, nights 1 and 2 was just about a week ago at this point. How do you feel the show came across, or the nights came across, and what were some of your biggest takeaways from the event?
So when I was on this same show a couple of weeks ago, we kind of talked about New Japan, and I wasn't super into how New Japan's 2020 went down. But coming off of Wrestle Kingdom, I'm back on the bandwagon, Nick. I'm back in and out. It's like New Japan is great again. And my big takeaway from the show is really a greater appreciation of what New Japan brings to pro wrestling, which is this incredibly slow burn, this long-term storytelling that's brought to wrestling. The main takeaway from Wrestle Kingdom is that Kota Ibushi is the IWGP World Heavyweight Champion. He won the main event both nights to walk out with the double titles. And to me, that is what makes New Japan so good, because if you're a fan of Kota Ibushi, which I am, you've been waiting for that moment for years. Mm-hmm. It was like 6 years ago, he had a match with Shinsuke Nakamura at Wrestle Kingdom. This is right before Nakamura went to WWE.
Yeah.
And everyone, when that match was ended, everyone was like, okay, Kota Ibushi is going to be world champion one day, and it's going to be soon because he's so talented. That was 6 years ago, and we're waiting for that, and we got that now in 2021. And he had to, he won the G1 2 years ago and main evented Wrestle Kingdom, and he lost. He had to hit that low, and then he had to spend a whole year building momentum back up for him to eventually get this win.
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately what is good about New Japan. We saw the same story told with Tetsuya Naito, who walked out of the Tokyo Dome the previous year with the titles. We saw before that the story told with Kenny Omega, and we also saw the story told with Okada, who, even though he won the world title, it took him years to get that big definitive win over Tanahashi at Wrestle Kingdom. And so these guys, they spend years and years working for this one goal. And if you're a fan, you're along for the ride. And that's my main takeaway from Wrestle Kingdom, is that the slow burn storytelling is what New Japan does better than anyone else. And that's why I think it appeals to fans.
Well, and then right after last year's Wrestle Kingdom, when Naito took the titles, right, that's when we saw a kind of change of pace, that we talked about last time. They real quickly shifted gears. Evil randomly had the title. I mean, what are your expectations here for Ibushi as the champion? He's not just the IWGP, heavyweight champion. He's also the Intercontinental champion as well. He's a double champion. What are your expectations for him as champion right now, kind of going into 2021?
Well, I think that's kind of the problem with New Japan. It's not a problem. It's more of just the circumstances of how they do storytelling, that Ibushi has reached his climax. He's already reached the pinnacle, which is to win both titles and walk out of Wrestle Kingdom as champion. Now I'm sure he'll be a good champion. I'm sure he'll have great matches. I don't think he'll disappoint, but it was a kind of a similar thing with Kenny Omega. When he finally won the IWGP Heavyweight Championship, his title reign was just okay. It wasn't as good as the climb there. Naito's title reign, I think, was okay. And now I think the pandemic and other circumstances played a role into that. But New Japan does seem to build up guys to eventually get that big win. And once they reach the top of the mountain, it's just kind of, it's kind of bland. It's a little different than, I think, WWE, right? WWE gives the guy a big win. They'll give Drew McIntyre the big win at WrestleMania. And then it's like, okay, now it's Drew's time.
Exactly.
It's almost the opposite in New Japan. Ibushi's time was this storytelling that's been going on for the last few years, and his peak was he won the title. And now when I think of New Japan in 2021, I think of Jay White, I think of Will Ospreay, I think of Sonata, I think of other talents that New Japan is going to try to elevate so that they can reach the next level. And
and I mean, I hate to cut you off there, but you bring up Jay White, and he's somebody where there's a lot of question marks around him right now. You're saying you see New Japan building around it in 2021. On the other side of the coin, I see a bunch of smoke around Jay White possibly going to, anywhere else. So you seem to think that the former, though, that Jay is going to be sticking around and they're going to be building around him and Ibushi kind of going forward. Do you think that's the case?
So let's look at this at the face value. I think just looking at how New Japan has advertised this Jay White thing, they've really like brought up that, hey, Jay White could be leaving. They've had stories on their website about that. Jay White's mentioning it in promos. To me, that feels like an angle. I know there have been reports that his contract is coming up and that he might be going elsewhere. If I were to gun to my head, I would say he's staying with New Japan. His contract might not even be up, because I believe Dave Meltzer said that a few years ago when AEW was getting off the ground, they inquired.
Well, I looked into that, and he debuted for New Japan. I think it was like January 2015, and so like the timing here may be that he did say he signed a 7-year deal, 2 years ago, but he could have been 4.5, 5 years into that 7-year deal when he told them I signed a 7-year deal. If that resonates, that makes sense.
So let's, for the sake of our discussion, let's assume that his contract's up or is coming up, right? He's going to be a free agent. Let's say that report that came out from a few days ago is accurate and that WWE is inquiring about him. Look, Jay White, to me, and I wasn't originally a big fan of Jay White. People can go back and look at my writings where I don't say like super like glowing things about how he was being pushed.
Yeah.
I thought one of the big takeaways from Wrestle Kingdom is that this guy's amazing, and that his character and his story had also kind of exploded in that main event of Wrestle Kingdom Night 2, when him and Ibushi went almost 50 minutes in that kind of epic battle. And while it was a great night for Ibushi, it was perhaps an even greater night for Jay White, because I think he established himself as, okay, this guy is as good as New Japan thought. They were right to push him this way. They were right telling the story. And now I think he's on this long story where he's probably going to turn babyface.
Yeah.
And he's got this year of doubt, this year where he feels like he's going to give up, this year where he's going to hit rock bottom, not unlike Ibushi a year ago, when he lost in the main event of Wrestle Kingdom. And that his story is going to come full circle. But if he's a free agent, look, I think because he's in New Japan and he's not on American television each week, he's kind of flown under the radar. But I think if he was on, Raw or SmackDown or NXT or AEW, I think people would talk about Jay White. They talk about the way they talk about MJF as this guy who's going to be the future megastar. And it's not just because he's really talented. It's because he gets the character side of things. He's a different character than MJF. But if you want, he's not as MJF's more openly entertaining. But if you watch Jay White, you understand that everything he does is to support his character. All of his matches are structured around what his character is like, as this kind of thief heel, this guy who will cheat, this guy who can steal things at the last minute. He's just kind of, I don't want to say old-fashioned or old school, because I think that's kind of a loaded term, but he's just got such a strong commitment to his character that not a lot of guys have, in addition to being a great worker, a great promo. So every company should want him. WWE should totally be after him. AEW, totally after them. And New Japan, sure as hell, should want to retain him. And if he leaves and he goes to WWE, look, this is not a knock on WWE and the people that are in WWE, but if Jay White walks into WWE, I think personally he's the most talented person in that entire company. And there's really talented people there. And I'm not used as a knock. I'm not saying Drew McIntyre is not talented. I'm not saying that Kevin Owens or Roman Reigns or any of those guys aren't talented. I just believe that Jay White is probably one of the 5 most talented people in the world at wrestling. And he's only 28 years old.
Yeah, I get I get the reasons to put him on Raw or SmackDown, but NXT, man, for me, if you were going to take him away from New Japan, and you've kind of sold me on the fact that he's probably not leaving New Japan, but I mean, if he were to come to NXT, you think about the matches with Balor and O'Reilly and Cross and Thatcher, and also how he kind of plays right to that AEW audience on a night where you're trying to counter program them. I can't think of a better North American platform for him at the moment than NXT, other than maybe going to AEW and mixing it up with the Bullet Club guys. But on that note, so like you're saying, Jay White here on a path to hitting rock bottom, maybe a babyface bounce here on the horizon. Where does that leave Bullet Club in all of this, Jesse?
Well, it's kind of, it was kind of strange in 2020 where Evil basically made this big heel turn and essentially became the leader of Bullet Club, or the de facto leader of Bullet Club.
Yeah.
And that was because part of the reason it was so awkward was because Jay White wasn't around. He wasn't able to get into the country. I'm not actually sure where Jay White lives. He might live in the U.S. He might live in New
I
Zealand.
think he's in Detroit. I think he lives like in the States here. I think he's like somewhere in the north. So just a
Yeah, so he basically couldn't get into the country like a lot of foreign talent, and then so it kind of felt like Evil had almost assumed this role in Bullet Club, and Jay White went from being the leader to being kind of like this guy who's in Bullet Club, but it's really just him and Gato. It's not really anyone else in Bullet Club coming down and helping him or him. I think he would tag with the guys, but to me, I think he leaves Bullet Club this year. I think he kind of, especially if he turns babyface, or perhaps even if he doesn't, he becomes more of a solo guy. Maybe Gato's still with him as kind of his manager and stuff. But I think then Bullet Club becomes Evil's group, or maybe they elevate Tama Tonga or another one of their guys, Kenta. They have guys to elevate in Bullet Club if Jay White leaves.
Do you think, you say Bullet Club weathers the storm? We're going to see Bullet Club through 2021 because a lot of people they talk about Bullet Club like it's not clicking like it was on its hottest years. Has this thing run its course or not? You think that there's still some road to run here with these guys? Yeah.
Personally, I think Bullet Club might benefit from the guys being the talent, established talent, maybe splitting up or going their separate ways. I just think the Bullet Club angle, which I was a huge fan of and helped make me a big fan of New Japan, has kind of run its course. It feels kind of outdated, especially because of just the sheer amount of turnover that has happened in that stable. But it's still the merchandise is still a moneymaker for New Japan. It's still a group that people identify New Japan with. So I think that New Japan will stick with it. They might move some things around. All the Tongans could split off. That kind of the Tama Tonga, Tongaloa, Bad Luck Fale, that side could split off, or the Japanese side, your Evils, your Dick Togo, Taichi Ishimori, that side could go a completely different direction. So it could split up. I don't really know specifically what.
I was, you brought up elevating Tama Tonga, maybe into a leadership role. I was a little surprised that they put him back in the tag team division with God recapturing the IWGP tag titles. I mean, went and got that haircut. I know that at the end of 2020, he was really starting to crow about how 2021 was going to be the year where he was going to try to break out in that singles run. And that's just not what happened here. And I was just a little surprised by the fact that they've decided to keep Tama in that tag picture. What do you think about that decision?
Yeah, I mean, New Japan's tag team division, especially the heavyweight tag team division, has never really been a strength of the company. And you're right about the Guerrillas of Destiny. They kind of feel like, while I enjoy their work, they do kind of feel like, okay, they're the tag chief champions again. They've been it 7 times. Who are they going to work with? What's different about them this time? And Tama Tonga is always one of those guys who's interesting in he's one of the longest tenured foreign wrestlers in New Japan. He's been there for a really long time. There's been years and years where people have been saying they got to push this guy. Singles run for Tama. Singles run for Tama. This guy's got this kind of potential. This guy's got that. All of this stuff. And I don't need to tell you this, Nick. You know all that.
Right.
But he's definitely someone who people think could be a single star, and I've heard it tossed around that he's going to be a single star, but he never really has gotten that kind of big push. And maybe that's going to be this year. I mean, again, he's someone who probably didn't benefit from the pandemic restricting his ability to get into Japan, but I could see him getting a singles push. I could see almost anyone at Bullet Club getting a big singles push at some point.
Yeah, well, and just like that, Kenta, somebody you brought up as possibly being someone who could step up in the leadership role for Bullet Club. He still has this IWGP US title shot on the horizon. Moxley made a comment. Are we any nearer, Jesse, to resolving the future of the IWA, or IWGP US Championship? How long do you think it takes before we finally see this thing go down with him and Kenta?
So at Wrestle Kingdom, Jon Moxley cut a promo, and he was standing. The promo was taped at the New Japan Strong studio setting in Los Angeles, and he was standing in the ring, and it really wasn't that much of a promo. He basically just said, people might have forgotten about me, and but that's when I'm going to strike. It was kind of generic, but it was fine for what it was. But that was, I guess, a sign that they could potentially be doing a Moxley versus Kenta match in Los Angeles, which we talked about this a few weeks ago when I was on the show. Hasn't happened for political reasons. Moxley's allowed to work for New Japan, but not in the United States, because that's something that AEW and Tony Khan are trying to protect. Maybe they have a working agreement now. Maybe that'll be the first sign of a working agreement.
I'll say this before we started recording, Jesse. I was looking into New Japan news. It looks like just a couple hours ago, broke Don Callis said he's no longer working with New Japan, so he's done. He's done all he can there in that role. So I don't know. My skepticism meter says that the AEW New Japan stuff may not be coming together here in the near future, at least. So I don't know if that means that we got to get this belt off Moxley, or if it means this belt's going to sit in purgatory for a lot longer. But I just found that to be very interesting. Literally just before we recorded, I read that news.
Well, and here's another aspect of it. Since early December, that has made things a little bit different. So Moxley could go to Japan, and he could drop the title. The problem with getting Americans into Japan is that they have to quarantine for 2 weeks. And Moxley, because for most of 2020, he was the AEW World Heavyweight Champion and featured on the programming every week, he didn't have 3 or 4 weeks he could just put aside to go sit in a hotel room in Japan for 2 months. Or 2 weeks. So then he could, drop the title. Now with him out of, or I guess he's really still in the title picture in AEW, but the fact that you could go a few weeks without him on the programming, and actually he wasn't on the programming for a few weeks up until Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
But, he could go away in April or June for Dominion or one of those big shows, and conceivably be like, okay, I'm going to go to Japan and I'm going to drop this title, and then we'll be done with that. So that could happen. I mean, we'll see. We're definitely going to see Moxley versus Kenta. It's been teased a lot. Whether it happens, at that in New Japan Strong and the studio in Los Angeles, whether it happens in Japan, whether it happens on AEW television, which I'm not ruling out, because when Moxley came out for his promo on Wednesday, I did think in the back of my head, wouldn't it be something if Kenta just ran out and beat the crap out of Moxley?
Took the title. Again, it's just like, I don't know what the politics of AEW New Japan look like. I know that, again, like with the, you're talking about all your top stars leaving you kind of in a lurch without really handing the torch off to anybody in New Japan to start their own promotion. That's not a little scratch with a Band-Aid on it. That's a swipe of the sword, if anything. So I'm not totally convinced things are totally like fine between these two entities. I'm as skeptical as anybody right now. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, though, you threw out Will Ospreay here. He got tied up in the speaking out stuff earlier this year. And, I was honestly a little surprised to see, recently he's been brought back into the fold over there and is getting, good reviews and things for his matches and things like that. What do you think about Ospreay's return to pro wrestling with New Japan? And I mean, to be frank, does that, they went through this with Elgin, where North American fans really kind of seemed to throw their hands up at the fact New Japan was still working with this guy. And of course, Elgin is now no longer welcome on North American televisions now at the moment. So like, how does Will Ospreay coming back like affect New Japan's allure to a North American audience? I think a lot of fans have kind of fallen out and they come back and they see this guy. I don't know. Like, I know there's definitely some people that have some eyebrows raised about that.
Yeah. So in regards to, you raised a good point bringing up Elgin in his situation where he basically became persona non grata in the US and almost exclusively had to work in Japan or in Mexico, and he became this wandering vagabond. I don't want to say really anything specific about the allegations regarding Will Ospreay, but I think that New Japan has a lot invested in him, and they still believe he's going to be a star, and he's not. I see other people could speak better to this, people who have been to Japan before and understand Japanese culture more than I do. So I don't really want to say anything too strong, but the backlash for him with the Japanese audience is probably different than the backlash he's facing from American or European audiences when it comes to social media and people saying, oh, I'm not going to watch because Will Ospreay's on the product.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to really make a judgment on whether or not it makes business sense to bring Will Ospreay back, whether it makes cultural sense to bring him back. I just don't know that much about that, how the various implications about that, and especially in relation to the Japanese market. I'm not on Japanese Twitter.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at what those responses are. I know that there are a lot of people on, my Twitter feed who made it very clear during Wrestle Kingdom that they don't like Will Ospreay and are not interested in his matches.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's like I see the blowback to it, and I want to get.
But how significant is that, really?
I wonder, man. The thing I thought about with WWE, with the Jackson Riker stuff and the Riddle stuff, and you say, oh, who's turned off? Well, you lose 5,000 fans here, 10,000 fans here. You chip away. Velveteen Dream, another 10,000, and all of a sudden, these little chips here, there. They start to pile up, and you see the decline in the viewership right now. And I know everybody says you can't point to one thing or another, but I don't think you're putting honey out there and attracting bees. I think you're putting vinegar out there and wondering why the flies aren't, or wondering why the bees aren't coming around.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely a key point that you can't ignore that. Look, Velveteen Dream has not been the same since those allegations came out. When it came to,
I don't get it, man. They brought him back out random ass one time like a week or so ago to have a main event, and he's gone again.
But think about the way he was viewed. Think about the way people talked about him before that and post that. It's a total change. And I know his booking, like they turned him heel. It was kind of weird booking that didn't probably help him. But he went from a guy who people were going to be like, this guy's the future of the company, the future of WWE is going to be a huge star, to I don't never want to see this guy on television ever again.
Yeah. I wonder. That's why I say, like, Will Ospreay reminds me a whole lot of that situation. So I just wanted to get your take on it. That's all.
Well, and again, I don't want to get into the specifics of allegations, but I do want to say that when it comes to the speaking out movement, people were accused of doing a lot of different things and a lot of terrible things. And I don't think I don't know if it's prudent to look at what one person did. Like, I'll use Joey Ryan as an example and compare and say, okay, this is what happened to Joey Ryan. That needs to happen to everybody who was mentioned in the speaking out movement.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, yeah. I mean, it definitely varies. I'm just saying, I just know that Will Ospreay's got some heat on him right now, and like the way he handled himself through that, and some of the allegations that came up about, restricting that girl's bookings and stuff over in the UK, who had, filed complaints and allegations against his friend. It's just messy business, and that's why I say, like, I don't know culturally exactly how it's perceived in Japan, but I know over here in the States, you bring up that guy, and that's the first thing most people talk about. So anyway, all right, Jesse. Well, I want to thank you for coming over, talking some more New Japan with me. Very interesting. Going into 2021 here with I think you're right. I think that they're trying to get back to where they were. There seems to be that they're putting the train back on the tracks. They're rallying around some people right now that I think that they know fans really like, especially Ibushi, and it should be fun. So with that, Jesse, where do you want to send people to find you, follow you, support you, all those great things right now?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Jesse Collings, JessieCollings. And you can read my columns on WrestlingInc.com, come out every Friday. And then I'm also featured on the Gentleman's Wrestling Podcast. You can find us on YouTube. We just did a whole show kind of talking about New Japan's 2020 and 2021. We talked a lot about the same things we talked about here, but we also talked about, New Japan's potential US TV deal. We talked about a lot about the junior heavyweight division and what they're doing there, and a lot of other. We spend 70 minutes just talking about it. So people can check that out. That's our last episode. And thanks for having me on.